Hola, ¿qué tal? Les habla Ralph Perales. Quiero invitarlos a que me acompañen en este programa. La Constitución americana también provee. Hello, I'm Ralph Perales. Welcome to Leyes Cotidianas, or Everyday Law, where we talk about the laws that affect you every day. In today's show, we're going to continue our discussion that started last week on the Georgia Illegal Immigration Reform and Enforcement Act, recently enacted by the Georgia General Assembly. And with us is again Mario Delgado, an economist. Mario, thank you for joining us. And Charles Kuck, a partner at Kuck Immigration, practicing in the area of immigration law, and also an adjunct at law professor at the University of Georgia Law School, and former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Chuck,
great to be here again.
Join us.
Thanks, Ralph.
And let's recap a little bit the discussion that we had last week when we started to discuss this new bill in Georgia. And Chuck, you had mentioned basically that the bill had addressed four sectors, if you want to call it individuals, sectors in our society. One was government, that we discussed the requirements on government and municipalities. The second was employers and the new requirements to use the E-Verify program. And we started discussing the one of police, law enforcement.
Law enforcement, yes.
And I want to pick it up right there. Because in essence, and this is no secret, the legislators announced that their aim is to sort of run out the illegal immigrants, do it enforcement by attrition, I think. That's is what
clearly their purpose
they call it, make it as uncomfortable as possible for them to be here. And I know I want to talk about some of those economic consequences that many folks in industry in Georgia are very concerned about. But let's finish talking about this law enforcement, because you know, that is the one, I guess, that most people associate with the Arizona law.
That's right.
It is the concern about the profiling, the concern that a policeman can just stop anybody for driving while looking brown or Hispanic, DWB, I think they call it now. Which has been happening quite a bit.
There's no doubt it's happening here.
And it just didn't just start. I mean, for the last 2-3 years.
It's been happening in those counties that have adopted 287G, the federal immigration enforcement program. It's documented. We have statistics to show it. It's absolutely happening.
Well, I've noticed, particularly through my partner who does some criminal defense, the large number of cases of tickets dealing with tag not illuminated enough.
Yes.
Weaving inside the lane.
Tinted windows.
Tinted windows. You know, most people don't even know that in your own lane you can't move, you know, back and forth like, you know, that's against the law in Georgia, actually. So there has been. So let's talk about it. So in essence, a policeman can supposedly have probable cause
to arrest you, to detain you, to
stop a crime, to
yes.
detain you, to investigate a crime, but that, of course, can be a very low threshold.
That's right.
Criteria. But so once the policeman can't, I guess if the policeman can't, you know, on the spot, confirm that you are either a U.S. citizen or a U.S. legal
you actually have
resident.
the burden. You have to produce a specific document identified by this bill, and if you don't, then the officer will, he has the option. He can detain you or not detain you. But if you're a police officer, that's why it puts police officers in a hard spot. What are you going to do? Are you going to detain everybody or nobody? Because ultimately, you have to make a choice to do one or the other, because you can't selectively detain people. So if I forget my license at home, or Mario forgets the license at home, they've got to detain both of us or neither one of us. Otherwise, they're going to be engaged in the profile.
Exactly, which is the problem.
It's a horrible position to put the police in here, a very, very difficult position. But the bigger problem with this law is that it's already been found to be unconstitutional. Not because of the language of the bill or the use of probable cause or reasonable cause or immigration. It's about the effect it has on the federal government's enforcement mechanisms and schemes. And because it interferes with that scheme, it is preempted by federal law.
Basically what we call the supremacy clause,
Supremacy clause
of the U.S. Constitution.
And when this is challenged, I think it'll be struck down.
And let's also inform the public that that law already was found unconstitutional, not only at the trial level, but by the Ninth Circuit
Court of Appeals, absolutely.
So now it's on its way to the Supreme Court.
If they take jurisdiction.
If they
exactly
take
right.
jurisdiction, of course. Yes, Mary.
The issue of crime is another cost to business. Now, as I understand, the law also says indirectly that if an illegal immigrant comes to a police officer to report a crime,
They're not supposed to be asked about their immigration
correct.
papers. Not
Now,
supposed to be.
at that particular point in time. Now, do you believe that's going to happen? If I have my family in jeopardy, am I going to report a crime when he will know who I am? Maybe at that point in time he won't do anything to me, but then at that time he'll know who I am, where I'm at. Am I going to do that? No. What he's doing is increasing the possibility of crime mushrooming by lack of contribution and participation by the population.
But it creates a distrust.
And we've seen that happen with other populations.
Look
before.
at Mexico. I mean, doesn't that ring a bell next door to us? So it's just illogical, irrational.
Well, and as an economist, you know, one of the things that most folks don't realize is that illegal immigrants don't come in one flavor. They basically, you know, you could have families where the husband is legal, the wife is not, half the children are, half the children. So what it's doing is it's going to drive away the legal immigrants,
that's a
not
big
only, which is our labor force.
But more important than that, or as important as that, by neglect of the federal government, we are commingling now a new wave of illegal immigrants. They are really more connected with drugs and crime in Mexico. That is indirectly being now protected, or at least ignored, by the part of the immigration population that otherwise would have readily reported, the honest population. So we're allowing now a cancer to spread, and this is by neglect and negligence of the bureaucrats and politicians in Washington, that they should have already enacted a law, because the amount of what they call now illegal immigrants that we have is the creation of a law that never been implemented, that have allowed illegals, by definition of the law, to grow unbounded, and now overnight, to look tough against terrorism and whatever political implication, they want to put a finger in it, while in the meantime we have swamped the nation with so-called illegal immigrants that were allowed to come in and welcome and invited to come in.
Let's, before we finish talking about all the effect of this law, let's finish with that fourth sector.
Okay, the fourth sector is, of course, people. You and I, the everyday citizen of Georgia, and people who are undocumented. This law creates 4 new crimes, and everybody needs to be aware of those. I believe that these crimes, in fact, probably can't even be prosecuted, and at least several of them will be declared unconstitutional once we go to court on this issue. The first crime is the use of a fake document with a fake ID about a fake person, not identity theft, but a fake document to get a job. If you use a fake document to get a job in Georgia, you will go to state prison for 15 years and pay a $250,000 fine. What was missing from the bill was the allocation of the money to build new prisons to hold all these people.
Well, that is, the penalty is stronger than if you steal somebody's identity to steal money.
The penalty is stronger than if you rape a 16-year-old girl. Let's not kid ourselves. This is a brutal,
in essence,
brutal law.
Lying to get a job, we're criminalizing that, and the penalty is higher than lying to steal.
Exactly, it is. It absolutely is. It reminds me of the play Les Mis, and Jean Valjean. He stole a loaf of bread and went to prison for 25 years. Now, the thing with that particular law is something similar to that is in the Arizona bill and was found to be unconstitutional, because the issue of employment of undocumented people, which this bill deals with specifically, and that law deals with, they can argue, well, it's not undocumented. Well, yeah, it's for undocumented, and they say it is preempted by federal law. It's preempted by the I-9 requirements, the IRCA requirements, and it will be found unconstitutional. There's 3 other laws that are now in this bill that citizens should be very, very concerned about. One is for transporting a, quote, illegal alien. One is for harboring a, quote, illegal alien. And one is for inducing a, quote, illegal alien to come to Georgia. Now, take, for example, what is an illegal alien? What most people don't know is that term is not defined in federal law. In fact, that phrase only appears 2 times in the more than 500 pages of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and then only in the context of reimbursement under 287G to counties. But it's not defined. So the legislators, Matt Ramsey, he decided he was going to define illegal alien. His first definition of that law early on in the process actually would have included you and me and everybody else, because it basically said any person in America who's in violation of federal law. Well, that could be anybody. So now they've defined it to mean that an illegal alien is someone whom the federal government has verified, is in violation of federal immigration laws. The transporting law, for example, says a person who, while committing another criminal offense or criminal violation, traffic violations, transports someone knowingly and intentionally knowing that they are an illegal alien. Well, how could you be prosecuted under that law if the only way you can know somebody's an illegal alien is if the federal government has told you that information?
That's verified. Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is it's completely unenforceable. The same goes with harboring.
Yeah, but the harboring also is basically defined as any assistance. It's not providing shelter. It's not just hiding somebody.
Any assistance that substantially helps an illegal alien to remain in the United States.
So a charity that provides Meals on Wheels or assists the homeless.
Churches are the primary thing. Many churches in Georgia target the immigrant community. You can go by any large church in town and there's a little sign in a different language because there's a different language congregation meeting there. Churches, particularly Christian churches, have done a lot of outreach to the immigrant community. If I pick up somebody that I know is undocumented and bring them to church, I am harboring, not only transporting them, but I'm harboring them. If I'm the pastor and I give them money for food, I am harboring them. Now the question, of course, goes back to, well, you can't actually prosecute me because the federal government didn't tell me they were illegal. Now, Matt Ramsey and his cronies, they decided they were going to try to exempt people from this bill. So they put a provision in there that exempts people from this bill, from being prosecuted under this bill, under two special circumstances. One is if they are providing services as part of a privately funded social service. But they don't define what a privately funded social service. Does that mean there's no government money? Or does that mean it's all government money but $1? And churches clearly aren't social services. Churches are religions and churches and 501c3 corporations. They're not privately funded 501c3 corporations. So you've got a situation where the averment is, people, they said, well, no, we exempted you, don't worry about it. And that was simply not true. It was just a bold lie.
It sounds like, I mean, they're basically putting folks at the mercy of a police officer or prosecutor. That because, I mean, are they going to prosecute a church? I mean, who knows? I guess under the law they could, but
there are prosecutors out there that would be more than happy to do it. I don't have any idea about it. I don't have any doubt about that. The bigger concern about this bill is the impact it's going to have on communities and on the ability to be that outreach person, that Good Samaritan.
And I got to take a quick break here. And Mario, I want to come back and talk about, what does this mean for Georgia here over the next few years? We'll be right back.
Desde el momento en que ellos llegan a nuestras vidas, dan su primer paso, aprenden a andar en bicicleta. Hasta la preparación de su primer día del 5º grado es un reto para todos los padres criar un hijo saludable. Permítanos guiarle a través de un embarazo seguro y feliz. Aprenda sobre salud, nutrición e información educativa relacionada con el desarrollo de su hijo. Padres e Hijos Atlanta, una publicación del mundo hispánico. Recoja su copia gratis hoy. ¿Cuál es su tesoro más preciado?
We're discussing the Georgia Illegal Immigration Enforcement and Reform Act. And Mario, I want to talk about what does this mean for Georgia? Of course, there's this feeling that the state of Georgia is going to be boycotted, much like Arizona. That may have some short-term impact in Georgia, but I'm more interested in, I guess, the long term. And I'm thinking, as the baby boomers are retiring, we have a big hole in our workforce. We can deal with some of that through efficiencies. But at the end of the day, there's no, it's known that what they want to do is make it as uncomfortable for undocumented aliens, which I think is going to include the documented as well. So what does that bode for Georgia?
Of course, Georgia is going to be impacted, and forget about the boycott. Just the actual everyday investment decision by businessmen. It's going to destroy it. I mean, who is going to come to an estate that the costs have increased? The labor availability, one of the most productive sectors, is gone. And who knows what else is going to be at. Society itself is going to be in turmoil. Crime is going to go up. But let me address it. Let me turn the table around, because I personally am tired of playing defensive end games with politicians when they address minor stuff compared with the big picture of the nation under the budget deficit that we're facing has to address. And by the way, they use the immigration issue as contributing to the cost of the deficit. Therefore, they have to address it anyway, even if socially or emotionally they don't want to do it. Well, let me tell you the real issues that the economy needs to face right now and involves touching the basis of major players. The biggest cost issue that the nation has that will reduce tremendously the deficit and will not require, if anything, will help reduce taxes in the process is the budgetary black hole that we have at the federal, state, and local level. It's inefficiencies and ineffectiveness galore. We are spending tax money, good tax money, in maintaining make-work bureaucrats, ineffective programs that are not being in place. This will be in the billions of dollars that we could address right now with an audit, a serious professional audit, and get rid of the programs that do not work, get rid of the manpower that we don't need, and get rid of the waste practices that we have. So the cost issue, that will answer and will leave money behind to have tax cuts. Now, on the revenue side, that we have access and we need to do it at the national level, and Washington should have been addressing that a long time ago, years ago, is the tax that not being collected, the loopholes and evasion of taxes at the individual level and the corporate level. Another issue that has been happening since the 90s, at least since the 90s, is what they call now the globally integrated enterprise. It's the old multinationals that now don't produce the complete product in one country, but are using the demand-supply link and distributing components of the process, of the service or product process throughout the world to try to find the most economic place to place that subcomponent so as to maximize profits. Forget that they were making profits before when they were in country. No, they want more. And for that, they debase the employment base of the economy, the revenue base of the economy, and of course the tax take. And they're taking it overseas. And let me, one more time.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your thought.
And one more time that is needed. First, we need to address that. Because in many cases, what is happening, being that labor is definitely more inexpensive overseas, they're only now completing the assembly of the product overseas and importing to us. First, the taxes are collected there, and importing to us those products. Now we have to import what we used to export. And they don't repatriate the profits. You say, well, eventually when they repatriate the profits. That used to be the case when we were a monopoly. Now the growth rate and the opportunities for investment are much higher overseas than are here. So those profits never come back. So they're getting away from debilitating the economic base, debilitating the employment base, debilitating the income base, and the tax base of the economy.
Am I hearing you to say that if labor doesn't come to the companies go to labor?
Correct, and other resources, not only that, on other resources.
Right.
They are moving subcomponents of the process all over the world.
Now, Mario, there are things, of course, in Georgia that we produce that can't be moved. Vidalia onions. I mean, we have a massive $65 billion farm industry here. What does this bill mean for that?
Well, the part of that, the Vidalia onion might not be touched, perhaps, because land is fixed. Right. And some products are, and the fertility of the land is in a certain place. But Vidalia onions and any other products are processed. They have other steps in the process to eventually, in many cases, make it eligible to the supermarket.
But if I hear what Chuck is saying, though, is that somebody has to work those fields, and if you're running off your labor, and funny thing was, something that happened about 10, 12 years
Back
ago.
in 1996 or so.
1996, when there was a raid on the Vidalia onion fields.
Saxby Chambliss came in and stopped the raid and let the Vidalia onions get picked. But think about it, 65, it's the biggest sector of our economy. If people aren't here to do it, now the counter argument is, well, you can just bring them in illegally under the H-2A program. That program is an economic and immigration nightmare.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't address it. I didn't ignore it. It's just that I already went beyond that. I'm assuming now that we have a finally rational immigration policy, that we have all the labor that we need.
What country has this rational immigration policy?
Imagine that we did. Imagine that we did. Okay, that we could, at least closer to what we have right now.
That's a tall order there.
Still, we have to address these aspects of the budget deficit. That wouldn't have resolved that.
Right.
Because agriculture, to a degree, is just a small component of GDP, gross domestic.
But doesn't this bill negatively affect your ability to do any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, it does. It does. But I'm assuming that's known. Assuming that a given. I mean, let's not debate the things that we have beaten a dead horse. We know that.
Well, apparently nobody talked about it at the state legislature because they didn't care about the economic impact of this bill.
That's correct.
In fact, they cared so little, they didn't even do a fiscal note to say how much this bill would cost.
I agree with that. But let me tell you one other thing that we need, that we haven't done that. That will be the answer to a lot of that. Assuming that globalization requires that we allow that to happen, because ultimately the consumer benefits itself by having better quality and lower priced products. We need an industrial intelligence analysis framework for the nation to identify what industry we are competitive globally and start helping the private sector, informing the private sector, not 5-year plans, not centralized planning, but providing the intelligence, the market intelligence that we have the network established with land-grant universities, with embassies throughout the world and experts throughout the world to identify that and start promoting that like yesterday. Because in the meantime, our labor force is drying out, the qualified labor force is going overseas because of lack of employment here, and the economy is hollowing out more and more. And eventually, we're not going to have any revenue to do half of anything.
Well, isn't our current immigration system, though, driving away the talented people that we want to keep in the United States? We have systems where kids come here, they go to Georgia Tech, they get a PhD in nanotechnology, and then we say, you can have a green card in 10 years. We're going to go home.
And that was the problem with the H-1B visas.
Right, with the H-1B and the green card process. The waits are
in one day, since they were limited, whether they were 50, 75,000?
65,000. Several years ago, they were gone in a day.
In one day. So.
No, this was happening in immigration. It's illogical, irrational, even stupid, for lack of a better word. But I'm assuming that that's even correct. We still have to plug these holes that are taking place, even if we have the ideal.
You have far greater faith in the people in Congress to fix this problem than I do.
If you add that to it.
Well, I'm like the Jiffy Lube commercial. I just want to change oil. I don't want to change the world. And of course, right now we got to fix this problem. Or they think they're fixing this problem. But my concern is, as Chuck has said, they haven't even looked at a fiscal note to see how much this is going to cost. They haven't looked at 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, as baby boomers finish processing out through the system, and now you got this deep hole in your labor pool, and Georgia having been so dependent on agriculture. Those are not things that you can, you
can't outsource dirt.
Exactly, you can't outsource it. You can't you may bring in some efficiencies into a farm, but you still need the fellow picking up the onion.
The efficiencies, for example, were addressed by the Farm Bureau when they said, look, you can't plant and pick Vidalia onions, as a prime example, by machine. It bruises them. You just can't do it. So you have to have the manual labor to do it, and that's always going to be a requirement. But think about this: if the dream of these folks came true, and all 425,000 undocumented immigrants left Georgia, and let's assume half of them have a wife and one child. That's 1 million people. What happens to Georgia's economy if 1 million people leave?
Well, not only that, but what happens to our congressional
well, we're going to lose several congressional seats as well.
I believe it takes about 500,000-600,000
to get 8 seats. We're going to lose 2 seats if that happens as well.
No, and not only that, I agree. I mean, it's just so obvious, and it's been going on so long that we're beating a dead horse. I mean, they should have done something.
The problem is it's not obvious to the people at the state capitol.
It is. The only thing they are putting their political priorities over the rational and well-being of the nation as a whole, as I see.
Okay, well, in 2 minutes, how do we solve the problem?
Solve the problem?
You got 2 minutes.
First, you got to address these issues.
I'm going to ask you to do something in 2 minutes that Congress hasn't been able to do in probably 14
I just
years.
gave you the answer. If we address those 4 things by necessity, we're going to pay less attention to that and let the thing flow the way it should flow from economic consideration. Because immigration is an economic issue, not a social issue. When we want to make it a social issue, is when we start destroying the process. Immigrants need to come here and be set in positions that the economy needs.
All right, Chuck, I'm going to ask you to solve the immigration problem in 1 minute.
Not a problem. We need to make sure that we have proper border security, we have immigration laws that serve America, that we are able to identify who is here and put them on the path to legalization. We do those things federally by asking our state legislature, instead of wasting time on a bill like this, to go to Washington, D.C. for a day and sit in Saxby Chambliss and Johnny Isaac's office and say, we're going to stay here until you fix the immigration problem. Trust me, if all the states did that, they would fix the problem in Washington, D.C.
And obviously this bill is the product of a frustration, I guess.
A legitimate frustration at Congress. The problem is it's directed towards Georgians and immigrants instead of where it should be directed, Congress. This creates a system of Juan Crow laws that bring us and reminisce us of the 1960s in Georgia. We do not want to go back in time. Georgia needs to move forward.
Well, I guess two wrongs don't make a right, huh?
That's right.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank you, Mario, for joining us today, bringing some interesting insight that we normally don't see here at the show with the economy. Charles, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Ralph.
Always a wealth of information in immigration. Remember, we'll be back next Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Until then, we'll see you. Y'all behave.
Leyes Cotidianas les llega a ustedes gracias al generoso apoyo financiero de la Fundación de Justicia Civil del Estado de Georgia. Mundo Hispánico, el vocero de la comunidad hispana desde 1979.